All right, 4.4 and 4.5 is factoring trinomials. So I like to put them together as one big lesson here for us. 4.4 deals with not having any coefficients on our x squared, and 4.5 does have coefficients, but I teach it all the exact same way so that we're not trying to go, does it have this or does it not? And so I'm going to put them all together in one lecture here today. Okay, so let's begin to look at that. All right, definitions. So I really like to compare two things here. So when we say a trinomial, we have ax squared plus or minus bx plus c. So that's what a trinomial is. It has three pieces, and specifically, it's going to be a quadratic for the most part here for us. So an x squared, and then an x, and then a number without an x. Okay, so a, b, and c are just numbers, and then we have our x squared and our x on those. Okay, we also have ax squared plus or minus bx minus c. And whether that c is positive or negative does dictate some things for me. So I want to make sure that I know what's going on there with that. Okay, so based on the form, this thing tells me some certain things. Okay. All right, so right here, if my c value is positive, then when I break down my problem, we're going to end up with a couple of binomials, and the sign in the middle will be the same sign. Okay, that means they're either both going to be plus or they're both going to be minus. We just have to figure that piece out. Okay, now since they're the same sign, whatever this is, those both won't be there. It'll either be a plus or a minus there. This will be the sign in the middle. Okay, so if this is a plus c, plus a number, then whatever the sign is in front of the bx here is what's going to go in the middle of those two binomials. And both pluses or both minuses. Now, if it's negative, that tells me they're going to be different signs. Okay? And so we just have to figure that out. So we're going to throw them in there and we're going to multiply some things out for those and see what works. Okay? Now, I do a process called guess and check. There are some other methods where you do a table and all these things, and that's fine. You're welcome to use that as long as you show your work and that you're putting together those tables and where everything's coming from on those. But for me, I'm going to do guess and check. So to show my work there, I'm going to guess some stuff and then I'm going to multiply it back out and see, did it work for those? That's how I show my work. Okay. All right, so let's get into our examples and just go from there. So we're going to factor completely. Number one. So x squared plus 13x plus 36. X squared plus 13x plus 36. Okay. All right. Now, the first thing always look for, we're going to ignore this for just a moment. Every time, no matter what type of polynomial we get, whether it's a binomial, so 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, 20 terms, we should always look for a greatest common factor first if we are factoring, if our instructions are to factor. We should always look for a greatest common factor. But we will see here there's no x, there's no number, so there is no greatest common factor for this piece, okay? So since I know that there's not a greatest common factor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw 2 parentheses side by side. Now we need to dictate what's going on. So right here, this one tells me same sign. So that's, I'm just going to write same. Okay, that tells me they're the same sign, and that means they are this. So this plus goes right here and right here. Okay, If that was minus in front of the 13, we would put minus and minus. But the plus back here on the 36 just tells me they're the same, and they're going to be whatever this is. So that's why they're both pluses. Okay? Well, now we need to break down two things. We're going to break down this x squared, and we're going to break down this 36, and we're going to check our answers. Okay? All right, so x squared, well, that's x and x. And those things have to go in the front because if we FOIL that out, it has to multiply back together and give me x squared. X times x is the only way that I get 2x squared. Now 36, we have a few different ways of getting to 36, right? We've got 6 and 6, 9 and 4, 3 and 12, 2 and 18, 1 and 36. So we want to kind of think through those and just pick whatever and start multiplying it back out. Okay, and you'll get better at identifying these problems as we move through them. Okay. All right, so let's just kind of pick one. Now, do be prepared to erase. I would highly recommend using a pencil for this section because we're going to guess things and we may be wrong. Okay, and you got to be okay with that. So it's not always going to be getting it right the first time, and you may get better and better at that, trying things out and seeing if it works. And identifying some ways, but in the beginning, you just may be throwing some numbers in there, checking and go, oh, that didn't work. So let's try something else, okay? All right, so 36, a lot of times I think 6 and 6. So I'm gonna write those down. So let's do our check. Check means that we're gonna multiply. So x plus 6 times x plus 6. And we need to see if I FOIL this out, do I get my original up here? So x times x is x squared. We're going to get 6x plus 6x plus 36. So that's x squared. Well, 6x and 6x is 12x, not 13. So that does not work, okay? So we're going to change those. We need to change those sixes. So let's try something different. Now we were close, so I don't want to pick numbers far away from those. So the next one's kind of come to mind is 4 and 9. So let's check again here. X plus 4 times x plus 9. X times x is x squared. We're going to get 9x plus 4x plus 36. 9 and 4 do give me 13x. That's good. So now I have my answer. Okay. And so that's the process we're going to use here on these. And as we get better, we may not have to go through multiple pieces. We may get it right the first time. And that's great. Awesome. But we may not. And so we want to make sure we can get through each one of those pieces, okay? So let's just work a bunch of these. X squared minus 8x plus 15. All right, so again, I look for a greatest common factor, but I see quickly that I can't. So I'm going to put my parentheses. This time it's a plus here, so my signs are the same. And they are both minus. All right, so for x squared, I get x and x. For 15, the easy one for 15 is 3 and 5. So let's do our check. So x minus 3 times x minus 5. So we get x squared minus 5x minus 3x plus 15. Well, those do give me -8. So there is my answer. So we got it right the first time. And there wasn't a lot of options there, so that's always nice when we don't have a lot of options because it narrows it down for us. Okay. P squared plus 3p minus 54. Again, this time we don't have a greatest common factor, but we have to check for that every time. So you're going to hear me say that over and over again. All right, so I'll put my parentheses here. Now this time the C value is negative. So that means one's positive and one's negative. And it doesn't matter if you put the negative first and the positive second. We will figure those pieces out later. Okay, and so we'll work through that. All right, so for p squared, we're going to get p and p. And then for 54, first thing comes to my mind is 9 and 6. Okay, so let's try those out. So I said 9 and then 6, and let's give that check a try. So p plus 9 and p minus 6. So p times p is p squared. We're getting negative 6p plus 9p minus 54. When we put those together, we do get a positive 3p minus 54. So that's good. We got our answer. Now, if I got the opposite sign and said negative 3p right there, we would just go back up and switch our signs if that's the case. But since we got the right one the first time, we don't have to make any changes for those. Okay. All right, m squared plus m minus 72. So again, we look for a common denominator, or a common factor, common factor. There's not one. So we can factor. Again, both our signs are going to be different because that's a minus. So plus and minus. And so we get m and m. And for 72, first thing that comes to my mind is 9 and 8. So I'm going to try those. This time I'm going to go 8 and 9 just to try it. So if I check it, m plus 8 times m minus 9, we're going to get m squared minus 9m plus 8m minus 72. So that gives me m squared. When I put those together, negative 9 plus 8 is negative m minus 72. So that's not good because I need a plus m. Because the signs are just different, I'm going to switch my signs, negative and positive. And so now when I check that, m minus 8, m plus 9, we get m squared plus 9m minus 8m minus 72. So that's m squared plus m minus 72, which is good. Okay. All right. 12x plus x squared plus 27. All right, now one of the things that we haven't had to worry about so far is the order. Everything has always been x squared first, right? So if it's not in that order where x squared comes first, we need to put it in that order. It should always be written so that it's the x squared and the number with the x, and then the number without the x last. So make sure it's always in that order. If it's not in that order, rearrange it before you factor, or you will probably do something wrong, especially when it comes to the signs. Okay? I look for my greatest common factor. There's not one. And so my signs are the same. They're both plus. So for x squared, I get x and x. 27, we get 3, and 9 is what comes to mind first there. So let's do a check. So multiply there, we get x squared, 9x plus 3x plus 27. So we're going to get 12x plus 27. So that is my answer. Okay. All right, so far, everything has been where we had just an x squared or a p squared or something like that. What if we have numbers in front? What do we have to do there? Okay, so let's start looking at those. So 3x squared minus 14x minus 5. Well, our process is going to remain the same. We start by looking for the greatest common factor, then we move on to creating the parentheses and breaking down the signs, okay, for those. So I look for a greatest common factor. There's not one here. And so write down my parentheses. This is minus 5, so it tells me one's plus and one's minus. Now we want to break down the 3x squared. So we have x squared, but we also have the 3. So 3 goes to 3 and 1. I don't write coefficients of 1 there. So just an x means 1x. And then we have the 5. Okay, so 5 is 1 and 5. Always remember you can do 1 times the number as a possibility. Okay, so we just have to try that out. So I said 1 and 5, so I'm going to go with 1 and 5. But we can always multiply and try them out. So let's do a check. So 3x plus 1 times x minus 5. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 5 is negative 15x. 1 times x is a positive 1x. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. So we get 3x squared minus 14x minus 5, which is what we wanted. So we got it right the first time. Okay. Now, again, things that I've mentioned, if this sign is different, so say I got a positive 14, we would just switch the signs. But if this number is completely different, say I got 10 instead of 14, then I need to start moving numbers. I can move the 5 to the 1 and the 1 to the 5, switch those. Or if I have other things that would multiply to give me 5, which I don't in this case, I would try other things, okay? So you may have to do some manipulating and moving things around based on your check, okay? All right, so 4x squared minus 15x plus 9. All right, so again, we look for our greatest common factor. And so we find out there's not one. And so we go to our parentheses. Our signs are the same. They're both minus. And so let's look here at 4x squared. Typically, when we see 4, I think of 2 and 2. When I think of 9, I think of 3 and 3. Okay. That's okay that they're both the same. We just need to try it out and see what happens there for those. All right. So check 2x minus 3 and 2x minus 3. So that gives me my 4x squared. And we get negative 6x plus 9. It's 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. Well, that's not 15. So that does not work. So we need to change something. Now, moving things doesn't change anything, right? I move the 3s, I still get 3s. I move the 2s, I still get 2s. So we have to actually change something. So let's start with this 4. We could start with the 9 if you want, but I'm going to start with the 4. I'm going to change this one to 4 and this one to 1, so I don't need a number there. And I want to see if that works. And if it doesn't, then I'll change the 3s. Okay? All right, 4x minus 3 and x minus 3. So 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 3 is a negative 12x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. So we're going to get 4x squared negative 12 and negative 3 is negative 15 plus 9, which is what we want. And there's our result. Now, make sure that when you're making changes, only change one thing at a time and then check it. Because if you make too many changes and it's still not correct, you don't know which change could have been the correct change. So only change one thing at a time when you're working through these problems. All right, here I've got 35y squared plus 34y plus 8. So we do look for a greatest common factor, but we will see pretty quickly that there is not one. Even with these big of a numbers, there's not always a greatest common factor. But we do look for it. So we looked, we did not find any. So we're going to put down our parentheses here. It's like I have plus, which means both of them are this first sign, which is also a plus. So for 35, typically when I see 35, I think of 5 and 7. So I'm going to put 5y and 7y. And then for 8, I typically think of 2 and 4. So those are the ones I'm going to go with there. So 2 and 4. Okay. So let's go with our check. So 5y plus 2, 7y plus 4. So we get our 35y squared. 5 times 4 is 20y. 2 times 7 is 14y. 2 times 4 is 8. So we put those together. 35y squared. 20 plus 14 is 34y plus 8. So we did get our correct answer there on those. So again, here would be a case, because we have both pluses, if we would get anything other than 34, we would move the 4 and 2 maybe, or try different numbers to see what we would get. Okay. Four. 18a squared minus 51a plus 15. All right, so here we look at this one. I've got some bigger numbers again. So we look for a greatest common factor. But this time we actually find one. We can divide all of those numbers by 3. So we need to do that. So the first thing here is we're going to take that 3 off. So we're going to divide everything by 3. And we're going to get 6a squared minus 17a plus 5. Okay. Now, you have to do that. You need to take that greatest common factor out. Because if you don't, you're not going to factor completely. But you also need to do it because now my problem's easier. Dealing with 6 and 5 are easier than dealing with 18 and 15. Okay. So you want to make sure you're doing that. Now, this 3 is just going to ride along. So we just need to bring it down and now break apart our parentheses. So I have a plus here, so both of them are minus. So for 6, again, I typically think of 2a and 3a. And then for 5, I usually think it is 1 and 5. Now it could be 5 and 1, that's it. It's on the options for that. And so let's see if that works for us. And so I'm going to focus in, we're going to leave that 3 out in front, so 2a minus 1 and 3a minus 5. We're only going to check this part here. We're not going to worry about that 3. It's just going to stick around there. So we get 6a squared minus 10a minus 3a plus 5. And so that gives me 6a squared minus 13a plus 5, which is not 17. So I don't need to multiply the 3 in for that, okay? So we know that's not correct. So we need to move some things. Because they're both minus, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to move the 1 and the 5 first. 5 and 1, and see if that works. So we have 3, 2a minus 5, and 3a minus 1. So 6a squared minus 2a minus 15a plus 5 gives me 6a squared minus 17a plus 5. So that's good enough to say, hey, there it is. We know we did the other piece correctly. And there is our result. Okay, so this one was wrong. This one was right. Let's do one more of those. We have to pull that piece out to see what's going on. 2y plus 4y squared minus 1/3. All right, now hopefully you already see that we have some powers going on there with that are different. I've been doing x squared, y squareds, and now I have a y⁵, so hopefully that triggers something. But before we deal with that, we do need to put this in descending powers. So I want the biggest power first, smallest power last. So let's start with that, because we want to make sure we do everything correctly. So negative y⁵ plus 4y squared plus 32y. All right, now they all have a y in common. So I can factor that off. That's a greatest common factor for those. And this first one is negative, so I need to factor off a negative y. Well, the negative is going to change all my signs, and then we're going to take one y away. So that now is positive y squared. This becomes negative 4y, and this one is negative 32. So now I can try to break down that trinomial piece in the parentheses. So negative y, we have our two parentheses. The signs are different, so plus and minus. So for y squared is just y and y. And 32, typically I think of 4 times 8. So now let's do our check. Again, I'm focusing on the other piece there. So negative y, y plus 4, and y minus 8. So I'm doing just those two pieces. So we're going to get y squared minus 8y plus 4y minus 32. So that's going to give me y squared minus 4y minus 32, which is what we wanted for that. That's not my factored part. Thinking of my answer there. Sorry, getting too fast. Here it is. I need it where the two parentheses are, don't we? So making sure we don't do that. Going too fast. In my head, I looked back up at the wrong piece, what I just wrote down. So make sure you always slow those down just a moment there, okay? All right, let's do one more problem. My numbering got off because I do have these written out a little bit differently, so I do apologize for that. So I don't know what number I'm on. Actually, I'm going to continue with whatever I have there. I know it's not correct, but that's okay. X to the 6th, it's 11x to the 3rd plus 18. It's our last one. All right, now this time I don't have an x squared, but I also don't have an x on every term. So I cannot factor off an x to get it down to an x squared. So when that happens, we do need to look for any numbers, but I don't have the other greatest common factors. So now we need to identify, can I still factor this? And so to do that, what we do is we look here, this is a 6, and we look at this number in the middle, this power. Is this 3? half of 6. And it is. So as long as this number, this power in the middle, is half of the power up at the beginning, then we can still factor that because we've been doing this. This is a 1. 1 is half of 2. So I could do 4 and 2, 6 and 3, right? 8 and 4, so forth, 10 and 5 for those. Okay, so there's no other greatest common factors, so I can write down my parentheses. I have a plus, so my signs are the same. Now, what do we do to break that down? Well, we break it in half, and it's this piece, so x to the third and x to the third. Now for 18, what multiplies to give me 18? First thing always comes to my mind is 2 and 9. It also is 3 and 6, but we'll figure out which one works for us. So let's do our check. So x to the third plus 2 times x to the third plus 9. So x to the third times x to the third is x to the 6. We're going to get plus 9 x to the third plus 2x to the third plus 18. So we put those together, we do get 11 x to the third in the middle. So there is our result. So once we identify that that middle power is half of that first power, then we're good to go. We can factor the exact same way. Okay. Now again, these factoring pieces you need to have down. We need them for chapter 4 and we need them for chapter 5 and other things later on. If we cannot factor, you are going to struggle for the rest of the semester. We always go back to factoring to be able to do some solving pieces. So make sure you're practicing these and getting them down as soon as possible.